guys, this is Miss Checka. I am whispering a little bit today because I am in a study, and I'm in a very important man's study. This is John Wesley's study at Lincoln College here at Oxford University. Now, if the name Wesley sounds familiar to you, it's because you hear it in a lot of university names, like Wesleyan, that's him. And he is most famous for being the founder of the Methodist Church. So now he's this person who's really, really well-respected, famous. This study was actually restored and done by a group of Americans in the 1920s. People really look up to him and revere him as the founder of the Methodist Church. But back in the 1700s, he was just a college student. He was a college student at Christ Church College in Oxford University. And a little bit of a rabble rouser, but not in the way everybody else was. So he and his brother were university students here at Oxford around the same time, and they had grown up in a very, very actively religious household. Not like, oh, we go to church on Sundays religious, but it was very much part of their daily life. And when they got here to Oxford, John was a scholarship student, so he had his courses paid for, or his studies were paid for, but he didn't have a huge amount of money. For instance, he would grow out his hair instead of paying for a wig, because in the 1700s, this is very fashionable to have a wig. And he and his brother were pretty frustrated and disappointed that the religious life on campus just wasn't what they thought of as being very enthusiastic or sincere, And it's an interesting thing to think about because in the 1700s, at the time that they were here in college, the majority of guys at Oxford, and it was all guys, so that's they're all guys, but of the men who were here, the majority of them were here studying they were going to take holy orders in the Church of England. They were Anglicans, and chapel was something that was required by everybody. So it wasn't that they were on campus and they didn't see religious practices happening. They were actually everywhere. It's just that to the brothers, they didn't seem particularly sincere. So they and a couple of their friends came up with a club. So they were going to have a club where they would get together and study the Bible, work on themselves and their own spiritual life. And this was a super fun it was not a super fun popular club, at all. This club got some mean nicknames. First of all, they called it the Holy Club, which gives you an idea of the tone of it and what it was all about. But other students on campus call them the Bible Moss. They call Bible Moss it's kind of funny, but it's mean. The Bible Moss. They somebody wrote about them. This is a bunch of Methodists. And of course, Methodist is the name that sticks, but that's decades into the future. Anyway, this club, you had to picture 1700s, college campus. We sometimes think of everybody in history being very serious. And sometimes if you have a mental image of your head of the 1700s or the 18th century and you're an American, you might be thinking of the founding fathers, because that's who we think of in the 1700s. It's kind of serious people. But 1700s at Oxford University is a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, a lot of fun having. And the Holy Club was not about that. The Holy Club was very much about studying scripture, the Bible. They were very much about writing diaries where they'd write down their thoughts. They would write down if they had sinned that day. They fasted, so they would not eat at certain hours to help them concentrate on their spiritual life. And it was pretty intense. It was pretty intense. They would meet together a lot. And they also, John Wesley had, I thought that this was very interesting, he had theme days for every day of the week. Theme day. So if you do stuff on social media, you might have theme days, right? So there's hashtag TBT, Throwback Thursday, or, Catter Day. Saturdays are going to be all about cats. Those sorts of themes. Yeah, Holy Club had theme days, but they were a little different. I wrote them down because I think it's pretty hilarious. So these were their theme days. Sunday, love of God. That's nice. That's nice. Monday, love of man, right? So on Mondays, you were just supposed to like especially concentrate on your love of fellow man. Tuesdays were for humility. And you guys, I mean, all of us can stand to be humble, maybe a little more on Tuesdays. I don't know. Wednesdays and Fridays were for mortification and self-denial. Yeah, 2 days. Thursdays are for resignation and meekness. And Saturdays for thankfulness. So that's nice. But I think it gives us a little bit of an insight into the dynamic of this club that the Bible moths, the Sacramentarians, the Methodists had not one but 2 days out of the week devoted to mortification and self-denial. So, no chocolate cake on those days. At any rate, after they graduate, John Wesley actually gets a job here at Lincoln College, which is one of the smaller colleges at Oxford, as a fellow, which is a really big deal. If you're a fellow at the college, then you get a place to live, supposedly this room. You basically have time, space, resources to study. And here in the corner, I think you can make out, that's his library. So this is John Wesley's books, and he spent a lot of time studying here. Studying theology and making the foundation within his heart and his mind of like what would later become this huge church. He also did a lot of preaching, and eventually he became what's called a tutor, what we would call a professor, and taught students. There were some tensions, all right? There were some tensions because he was really, really, really critical of the practices at Oxford, of religious practices, which they received as kind of like, you're criticizing the Church of England. We don't really like that. So he would preach a lot. He was really intense with his students. He was really intense with his Holy Club, and they would do some good things, right? Like there were 2 prisons here in the city of Oxford. One was a debtor's prison, so literally a prison for being too poor, not being able to pay your debts. The other prison was like, you have committed a crime prison. And he and the Holy Club would go there and bring the prisoners scripture. They would pray with them, but they would also bring them food, fuel, so they could be warm in the winters, and get them legal aid. Basically, if you're a prisoner, you don't have a whole lot of resources for lawyers or stuff. I found a reference to one case I thought was very interesting. There was a prisoner named Mr. Blair who was in jail for being gay, and John Wesley thought that he was being treated unfairly. Now, it's unclear if he thought that the treatment in jail was too cruel or if it was wrong for him to be in prison in the first place. But, it's an example of his compassion and his sincerity in what he was doing. But he got a lot of criticism for that. Why are you defending this guy who's obviously a homosexual? So that was some pushback that he got. One of the guys in the Holy Club had a nervous breakdown, so that gets him a lot of criticism. But the guy who had the nervous breakdown was so convincing. They're like, no, Mom and Dad, it's not this club, that the parents actually sent the little brother, and the little brother was not that happy here with John Wesley, and actually wrote his parents and said, this guy is so strict. If I keep studying with him, like, this is going to ruin me. This is terrible. And Wesley found the letter before the kids sent it to his parents and was like, no way you're sending this. So there were some tensions there. Eventually, in 1735, Wesley leaves the university. He leaves Oxford. He leaves England. And he goes to America. And he has a mission there. And in this mission, he mostly wanted to preach to the Indians and to the brand new Americans. That didn't work out so well. It was pretty much a disaster on all levels. Ben, thank you, Ben, pointed to me, said, hey, Miss Checka, look up this lady, Sophia Hopke. So while he's in Virginia at this mission, he falls in love with this girl, Sophia. Yay, no, Sophia fell in love with somebody else and married somebody else. And after she married the other guy, then John Wesley, as her preacher, minister, spiritual leader, would no longer give her communion, and that caused a scandal, and he ends up coming back to England. So he comes back to England. He does come back to Oxford, but at this point, there's a lot of tension, as he becomes more and more prominent and is the Methodist Church as a thing, as its own church, gets to be a bigger and bigger deal. It's mostly the people in the city of Oxford and in the city of London. It's not the people at the university. And in fact, last thing I'll share with you is he gave the last really big sermon that he gave for the university. He gets up there and he just like shouts out to the people in the audience who are with the university that Christianity and like the characteristics basically of Oxford people is that they're filled with pride, gluttony, avarice, luxury, sensuality, drunkenness, and uselessness. He says uselessness twice. And I think at that point he knew they're probably never going to ask me to preach here ever again. So after that, not because of that, but after that, he eventually leaves Oxford and becomes one of the most influential men of his century, becomes one of the most influential men of England. And if you ever drive in your town and you see a Methodist church, or maybe you attend a Methodist church, just know that it is John Wesley, and that he founded a lot of his ideas, did his writing and thinking in the middle of like a fairly crazy college campus, Oxford University. So everybody be good, y'all, because today is Wednesday, which means it is Mortification Wednesday.